I was 16 and we met on Facebook. He went to a school nearby, and we decided to meet up for a movie. We had a great time together and ended up dating. First time he came to my parents' house, he had an ankle monitor on for house arrest, and wouldn't tell anyone why. Red flag number 1. And since he was a minor, we couldn't find out. My parents obviously didn't allow us to hang out, so we hung out at his house or around town, at the YMCA camp. I was rebellious and naive. Things started to get weird when I noticed his family was pretty odd. One day we were doing it in his bedroom, and I saw his father looking in through the blinds. I screamed and called him out, and his dad ran off. The stalker guy told me that his dad was just into redheads and liked to watch us, so this wasn't the first time. I went to leave, and his mum was doing crack in the kitchen, so I decided it was time to break up, and this is when things got bad. He started crying and told me that he's in cancer treatment, and that's why he needs me. He doesn't have long to live. I believed him and told him we could be friends. This is when the stalking started. He switched schools to my high school, but never went to class. He would just stand outside my classroom looking inside until it was passing period. When I would leave class, he wouldn't address me. He would just follow, about 10 to 15 feet behind me to my next period, and stand outside the classroom again. I was too intimidated to say something to him, as he was 6'4" and heavy set, so I just let it happen for a few weeks. It started to progress when he would follow me home every day. He would get on the same bus as me, despite living across town, and walk 10 to 15 feet behind me all the way to my house. He would stand outside, just staring up at the window, until around the time my parents got home, and then he would just leave. Finally, I told him to piss off and leave me alone. I told him we could no longer be friends or acquaintances or anything, and to forget about me. However, that escalated things way further. I started getting about 150 calls a night. Half of them were him screaming death threats and in detail torture methods that he wanted to do to me, and the other half were him singing me love songs that he wrote on his guitar. Every time I blocked his number, he seemed to just magically get a new one and leave more messages on that. I woke up one day to see that overnight he had left me one of these dancing, singing snowmen on my porch. He had stabbed it in the head, and the knife was sticking out. He covered it in his liquid deodorant that I had previously mentioned liking the smell of, and I noticed that there was a hole where the little song recording device was. When I pressed the hand, it was not the regular Frosty the Snowman song that played. It was his voice singing eerily, "I'm gonna have you forever. I'm never gonna let you go." I was done at this point and told my parents, who contacted the school. They suspended him, but he still waited at my bus stop every day and walked to my home with me. One day he ran at me, like he was gonna tackle me. When I tensed up for the impact, he stopped and hugged me. It wasn't a regular hug, it was like he was trying to crush me. I was 5'1" and about 90 pounds at the time, and he ended up cracking one of my ribs. I cried and he started crying too before running off, and he left me a voicemail apologizing in song. This one night is the night I'll never forget, and it's the reason why we got a restraining order and my dad got a gun. I woke up one evening for no reason. I was just fully awake. I got up to go to my kitchen to get a glass of water and relax, and in the reflection on my fridge I saw movement in the backyard. I couldn't see well because it was so dark outside and so light inside, so I went to the back sliding glass door to get a better look. When I got closer, I was met with the silhouette of a 6'4" man standing just outside the door. The stalker guy was standing in my backyard under my room at 3 a.m. He was just staring at me. I yelled at my parents and got them up, but of course he was gone by the time my dad got outside. There's a patio right outside my bedroom window that goes all the way around to the ground, so it's possible he could have been on top of the patio looking directly into my bedroom window before. We got a restraining order granted shortly after, and stalker guy dropped out of school. I haven't seen him in person, but every 6 months-ish, he makes a new Facebook and tries to friend request me. I block and report it every time. Have you ever heard that myth that if you wake up in the middle of the night for no reason, there's likely someone looking at you? Well, maybe it's true.
My name is Lillian. I have 2 kids, a boy and a girl, who are everything to me. What I am going to report today happened to me a few years ago. Ever since I was a teenager, almost every night, I had the same dream. But it wasn't just a repeated dream. It was more like a nightmare. I woke up scared and was too afraid to go back to sleep. In the dream, I was going down a street with a very high wall, and when I noticed it, I saw a gate and looked through it to see a huge cemetery. I went in and looked at the headstones. They belonged to children of different ages. I was suddenly fascinated when I heard a baby cry. The further I walked, the farther the exit and the clearer the baby's crying became. I looked on top of a grave to see a child in only a diaper crying and waving her arms and legs. I ran to it to try and help her, but when I arrived, I saw a deformed child. I can't explain how horrible it was looking at it. In the dream, I couldn't get the baby, and when I saw my aunt, who was still alive and appeared from behind the grave, she said, "What are you waiting for? Won't you hold your child in your arms?" I was horrified. She took my arm and tried to make me put my hand on the baby. I screamed, said no, and started to run. And the more I ran, the more the crying increased. I couldn't get out. I ran and ran between the graves crying, and that agonized scream accompanied me. When I saw the gate, my aunt appeared in front of it with the baby in her arms. At that moment, I always woke up sweaty, desperate, and crying several times. I spent the day with the cry in my head. That's how it was for years. I always had a real panic at the thought that one day I would have a child. Until I got pregnant at 20. I tried not to think about the nightmare and tried to pray a lot, asking God for my child to be healthy. I realized during pregnancy that the nightmare didn't happen anymore. I was glad the torment of the night was over. My son was born perfect with great health and happiness reigned at home. The years went by and I had all but forgotten the dream until one day, when my son was 3 years old, I got pregnant with my second child. But at 5 months, the ultrasound showed that he was going to be born with deformities. My world collapsed when the doctor said that the best thing to do was to terminate the pregnancy. But I refused. I couldn't believe he would say such a thing because my son was part of me. A few weeks went by until one day, I woke up screaming and crying. The nightmare had come back, and this time much stronger. When I woke up, I realized I was bleeding. I was in despair. I felt a significant pain and ran to the bathroom. Unfortunately, I ended up losing my baby. It was traumatic, and to this day, I don't understand what happened. But the life that followed, the nightmare stopped, and I was living my life in peace. One day, my son was in the corner of the house playing and talking to someone. I walked over and asked who he was talking to, and he replied, "You can't see, Mommy? It's my brother." He looked to the side. I felt butterflies in my stomach. I tried to let it go. I thought he was imagining things since the loss of my pregnancy was difficult for him. He really wanted a brother. I picked him up to talk to him, but he insisted he was watching and talking to his brother. I made him aware he should not be saying such things because it wasn't funny and I didn't like it. He shut up and I took him to bed as it was already past 10 p.m. When I was leaving the room, he asked me the following question. "Mommy, why does my brother have a crooked face? He said I'm bothering you and he loves you a lot more than I do. But Mommy, that's a lie, because I love you so much more than anything in the whole world." I hugged him, but his words bothered me deeply. I left the room feeling like I was being watched. I woke up a few hours later hearing someone running around the house. I thought it was my son who had gotten up. I looked at the door and saw a huge figure passing fast. I lost sleep instantly. My body shuddered and a shiver came over me. I got up running and saw a figure entered where my son was sleeping. The lamp was on and I ran into the bedroom, and that's when I saw a boy with sunken eyes looking at my son. I felt my body freeze and despair seized me. He looked at me without expression and said,
"I'm your son, you know."
His face instantly changed and he glared at my sleeping son. I immediately took my son out of bed. He woke up scared and I ran with him out of the door when I heard a very strange voice say,
"Don't leave me here."
I didn't dare look back. We stayed in the yard until my dog began barking. I was anxious because I didn't get the keys and there was no way to open the gate. I got a towel that was on the clothesline and wrapped it around my son because he was cold, as it was dawn. I tried to calm him down, and with a lot of effort, he was finally able to fall asleep on my lap. I stayed there with him and my dog beside me, looking at the house. In the morning, his father arrived and I explained what happened. Although he didn't believe in these things, he knew I wouldn't be outside the house with our son for no reason. When we entered the house, everything looked the same. I called my grandmother and told her what happened. She said a very strong prayer and told me to remain calm and to go to church. She advised I light a candle for the soul of the child that was mine who refused to leave me. I did as she asked, and nothing else happened after that. Today, my son is 14 years old and doesn't remember this story. I had also forgotten it until a few weeks ago, when I saw a dark shadow around my son.
As a kid, I loved collecting marbles, and to this day I am fascinated by every object that is spherical. I also used to work a dead-end job at Walmart as a stocker, and when I needed to, as a cashier. It was Monday, and nearing the end of my workday. Looking at the clock, I sighed as the hours finally hit midnight, so I began closing the tills. The last customer was in the store, but something seemed off. The client was an older man and wore an eye patch, and seemed to look around him every now and then, twitching as he did so. I automatically assumed he was some druggie off the streets, looking for some shelter, but I didn't take any action, since closing wasn't until another half hour or so. Finally, he proceeded to the checkout, a loop of rope in his hand. He looked me right in the eye and asked me a question.
"What happened in the aisle near the gardening section? The floor's wet with oil."
Tentatively, I grabbed the radio and called for the caretaker, the only other guy in the building. But he didn't respond, so I figured the fat bastard had left early. Finishing up the man's purchase, I watched as he left the building, and then I proceeded to where the oil spillage was. As I approached the end of the hall, I saw that there was indeed oil smeared all over the floor. Sighing, I walked over to the stock cupboard to get a mop, opening the door when I was abruptly shoved. The floor was slick with oil and I slipped hard, banging my head against the floor of the cupboard. A wet sensation on my hands. I tried pulling myself up, when I realized I was holding onto the janitor, dead and bloody. He was gagged and missing both eyes. The panic and despair took over me, crawling to the emergency exit. The customer suddenly appeared in front of me holding a baseball bat. And then he proceeded to smash me square in the head. Everything blacked out. Woke up a little later. In front of me was the old man, his eye patch lifted to show a grotesque hole, still bloody and raw. I was strapped to a chair with the very rope I had just sold him. His words came out in a frightening rasp.
Don't worry, son. I just need to borrow one of your eyes. You see, your friends didn't fit too well.
My heart raced as he brought the knife to my face, inches away from my eyes being forced open by his fingers. Luckily, the security alarm went off, probably due to the emergency exit having been left open for so long. The psycho tried to run away, but the supermarket doors closed automatically. I managed to free myself from the ropes, wriggling hard until they became loose. I rushed to the power panel and turned off the generator. The alarm stopped and the lights in the establishment went out. It was the opportune moment for me to act. It was dark and the man couldn't find his way out, so I followed him silently over the cereal cracks. Eventually, he found the emergency exit and started running towards it. Intercepting him, I tackled him from the side, wrestling with his hands, which held the knife so desperately. I punched him in the gut and he seized up, dropping the weapon. Without thinking, I picked it back up and, digging into his only eye, gouged it clean out. The shock was so great that he lost consciousness. I wasn't sure if he was dead, but I pulled his body out of the supermarket and took it to the back, where I threw it into the incinerator, where the garbage was usually tossed into. A few fiery infernos later, the man ceased to exist. I looked at my watch and realized it was time to leave. Shaking, I started to walk home. I needed to calm down and took out my marbles, rolling them in the palm of my hand. It was a soothing sensation and my breathing steadied, except one of these marbles was a lot bigger than the others.
Back when I was 17, my first real girlfriend texted me one night to be like, "Parents are on a date night. Come over and we'll have the place to ourselves." Yep, the text that every young man waits for, the one that makes everything around you glow in gold while you hear the voice of God saying, "My son, you have been chosen. Now go forth and multiply." I've been planning on a night of Modern Warfare 3 with the boys, but within minutes, I was in the shower scrubbing the enamel off my teeth in order to become a little mint, drowning myself in cologne and raiding my brother's rubber stash for an entire platoon's worth. I remember texting her like, "Want me to bring anything over? I got a few Red Barons." And she just replied, "Nah, just bring yourself." What a feeling, dude. Girlfriend is home alone and all she wants delivered is me. So I rushed to finish off getting dressed. Spent like 5 straight minutes in the mirror making sure I look fresh and clean. So fresh and so clean. And then I was ready to go. The walk over to my girlfriend's place took like 20 minutes, so from the time of getting the text to me actually arriving, couldn't have been any more than an hour. She had one of those long driveways too, not like some southern manor house or anything like that, but enough so you got a long look at the house as you were walking up to it. Then right as I'm about halfway up the driveway, I see someone walking through one of the upstairs bedrooms who was definitely not my girlfriend. I stop dead in my tracks, look up at this guy, and I've got this weird mix of anger and confusion and just utterly feeling a little bit heartbroken. I whip out my phone, dial my girlfriend's number, only to find her phone is switched off. My head is just swimming with negative thoughts. I think I was about to have a panic attack, like I just couldn't believe she'd do that to me. I was checking if I had the right house, double-checking the upstairs bedroom, like 100% certain that I'd just seen someone, but also telling myself, no way, I must be hallucinating or something. But nope. That same dude in the green hoodie walks through her parents' bedroom again, like all the way in and then all the way out. But on the way out, he sees me and he stops and stares at me. He's looking at me like, "Who are you, my guy?" Where I'm looking at him like, "Me? Who are you?" But as I'm looking, I notice there's something weird about his face. It's all distorted. And then it hits me that His face is all distorted because he's wearing, like, literal pantyhose over his head, like a meme of a bank robber or something. Then right as I'm thinking, like, what kind of weird stuff is this? I'm like, oh no, he's not a meme. He's literally robbing the place. I just panicked and ran back down the driveway before dialing 911. But then, as I'm giving the operator all the details, I realized that my arrival might have prompted something bad to happen to my girlfriend. I ended up running back up the driveway, kicking on the door and shouting up at the window, "Cops are on their way, you better get out of there." I added a few expletives, but I won't say them here. I didn't hear anyone shouting back. In fact, I couldn't hear anything going on inside at all. But that didn't mean there wasn't anything going on. The intruders, home invaders, whatever you want to call them, they could have been doing anything to my girlfriend in there. And that's if they hadn't done something irreversible already. Waiting those few minutes for the cops to arrive was agony, but the dispatcher promised me that they'd roll up with their lights and sirens blaring to try and scare the intruders off. We later found out that worked like a charm, but no one realized that until we were inside and my girlfriend was safe. She was scared to death, but she was okay, and it turned out that my timing had been absolutely impeccable. The two guys that broke in through the rear door of the house had only just tied her up in her bedroom and were right in the middle of ransacking the house when I showed up. And yes, they were actually wearing pantyhose. Seems kind of ridiculous, but the cops told me it's the smart choice for home invaders, I guess. You get pulled over with a ski mask in your passenger seat in Florida, questions are going to be asked. But a pair of pantyhose, you could just shrug it off and say, "Oh, that's just Mima's laundry day," or something, and there's no probable cause. Needless to say, when the cops left, we were way too shaken up for any alone time, and my girlfriend was in no mood to hang out at a place that had just gotten broken into, so we ended up going back to my parents' place to hang out. Nothing in the way of privacy, so I didn't get the explosive evening I'd been hoping for, but still, it was just cool to have been the one to have saved her, as she put it. I didn't save anyone. Those dudes only bailed when the cops showed up, but still, you can bet I took all the credit she wanted to give me. We ended up dating until maybe our sophomore year of college. After that, neither of us could handle the distance, but we still keep in touch, and I'm pretty sure our little post-relationship friend status is rooted solely in that mild shared trauma of having confronted a pair of home invaders together.
Here is some backstory. I live in a small town pretty far away from the main city, but it's still a part of it. I live in Karachi, Pakistan. Right next to my town is a rural area with farmhouses and animals and breeding places. In this rural area, a friend of mine owns a farm with a good amount of ammunition, which is very rare in Pakistan because of gun laws. But the friend happened to be from a gun-dealing family. They were staying at the farm that night, and it was only me, my friend, and a helper there. His cousin was usually there, as the cousin owns the farm, but he was off doing some work that night. Me and my friend were on the rooftop smoking cigarettes and drinking some beer when I noticed a large semi-truck approaching down the highway into the rural area. It came down the road, and just when it was about to make the turn to go onto the farm road, the headlights went off. That's when we knew it wasn't a friendly truck. My friend made a dash outside carrying a 9mm pistol, which was usually enough to scare people off. But just to be sure, I stood on the rooftop with an assault rifle. Our goal was to only scare these people off and not do anything stupid. Now, my friend made a big mistake, standing outside the farm, and some people shot rounds straight at him. As you can imagine, we were petrified. My friend ran to the other side of the road in a panic, no clue what he was going to do, and I shot a whole clip into the air trying to scare off these guys, basically saying we have larger guns as well. It seemed to work, as the guys left straight away, and my friend came up and we sat and smoked more thinking about what we should have done. We were considering going to the police when the guard dogs began barking like crazy. These were well-behaved dogs that would not bark for any reason, and they seemed to be barking at cattle. I ordered them to quiet down, which they normally would do right away as they obeyed me, as I had trained them, but they didn't seem to budge. They kept on barking and biting the cattle when the helper let out a scream that was immediately hushed out. I actually thought that the helper was shot dead or something. I was scared out of my mind, so was my friend. I made my way down to find the helper lying on the floor with his head busted open. That's when I noticed the farm door swung wide open. One of the guys, or the robbers, had snuck into the farm and hidden among the cattle, looking for the perfect opportunity to open the farm door. I looked up to see my friend with horror in his eyes. The truck was approaching again. I'm pretty sure I almost crapped myself this time, knowing full well that we were not only about to get robbed, but probably killed too. I untied the dogs immediately, thinking they would provide at least a bit of help. My friend tossed me the 9mm, and I stood there shaking, waiting for a possible shootout death. That's when the luckiest thing I've ever seen happened. The police had been reporting shots fired, and they made their way to the rural area. It was rural, so it took them quite a while, but their timing was amazing. The red and blue lights possibly scared the robbers away, but they were like angels sent from heaven for us. We told the cops everything that happened, and the cops offered to stay with us for the night. We accepted it, and told the neighboring farms about the lurking threat as well. Thankfully, nothing like that ever happened again. While I was in university, I took my motorbike down to pick up my wife, who was my girlfriend during this story. She worked in an office building downtown and was fortunate enough to get off work early on Friday afternoons. So I hopped on my Kawasaki Ninja and headed downtown. I called my girlfriend with the comms unit attached to my helmet to let her know I was near her office building and looking for parking. She informed me that she would meet me at the food court in the mall that is across the street from her building. Now, for reference, I always bring my helmet with me no matter what. I learnt my lesson from leaving it on my bike and having it stolen once before. The other thing is, I had a second helmet in my backpack for my girlfriend. Safety first. The second helmet will become important later. After meeting her in the food court and having a meal, we wandered around the mall, looking at engagement rings and such. She found a ring she liked very much and, yes ladies, I ended up buying it. While I dumped my wallet out on the counter and imagining my bank account emptying, my girlfriend grabbed my arm and said, "Hey, the same two guys have walked past the store for the 5th time while we've been in here, and they keep looking at us." In order to relax her, I responded with the ever-clever, "They're just jealous because of how damn good I look in my riding gear. Really, it's a problem." Through laughter, my girlfriend proceeded to inform me that my sexy outfit made me look like a fat ninja. With the two guys forgotten and my ego obliterated, we left the store to make our way towards the bike. To get there, we had to go down 2 escalators, walk across the bottom floor of the mall, across the street, and into the lot of her office building, where my bike was parked. Just as we stepped onto the first escalator, my girlfriend suddenly grabbed my arm really tight and used her eyes to draw my attention to 2 guys directly behind us. I looked back at her, and with a slight nod, she confirmed that it was the same guys that had walked by the store. I took off my backpack and pulled the second bike helmet out the bag and handed it to my girlfriend so that we could hasten our journey. As we stepped off the escalator and made our way to the second one, I caught the reflection of the 2 guys in the glass window of the stores in the mall. They were behind us all right. I could hear them making comments about my girlfriend's appearance to each other as we walked, but not quietly. Their comments were loud for other people to hear. When we reached the second escalator, my blood was boiling. It took everything in me to not turn around and face the perverts head on. My girlfriend absolutely hates conflict, and out of respect for her, I kept my mouth shut and doubled our efforts to leave. While we were walking towards the exit on the main floor, I heard it. The sentence that will forever make me paranoid. One of them said to the other, "Let's kill him and take her." For the sake of your ears, dear listeners, I did not use the vulgar words that they used to describe their intentions. My girlfriend's grip on my bicep tightened like a vice, and then I heard it and saw it. She was sobbing, and I could see the wide-eyed fear in her face. I pushed her directly in front of me to force a faster pace out of the mall. We exited and started to turn the corner of the street, where we had to cross. My girlfriend kept looking back with a panicked voice, and she said, "They're coming." Hearing the fear in her voice made something snap. I shut everything out and went cold. As soon as we got out of the corner, I forced my girlfriend around it and went against the wall. I looked at her, and she looked right back at me. We ran. I took the helmet that she was clutching in her hands with a firm grip. She took off across the street heading for the bike, and I stood there waiting. I took the moment to get my helmet on for protection, and took the second helmet in my hand ready. I heard the sound of running footsteps coming down the sidewalk around the corner. What happened next may just be the craziest damn thing I've ever done. Before I continue with the story, ask yourself, if you heard those words from two perverts following you and your loved one, would you play it off as them being punks trying to scare you? Or would you take it as seriously as a heart attack, like I did? These two threatened to kill me. I was okay with that, I accepted that. But what they threatened my girlfriend with, I refused to brush off. She was a victim of sexual assault before I knew her, and absolutely refused the smallest chance of something like that ever happening to her again. As soon as the two guys neared the corner, I stepped forward and gave them the universal sign for slow down by taking a swing. Let me be the first to tell you that when a motorcycle helmet meets a person's face, that's the start and the end of a fight. Period. No, I didn't end his life, but I guarantee the guy felt like I did. Pervert number 2, at my surprise, didn't even flinch at the sight of his body being destroyed. He threw some punches and I took those punches. We locked arms and he slammed me into the wall. I pulled my head back and headbutted the guy with my helmet on. He stumbled backwards and I seized the moment and kicked him on the side of the knee and threw some punches of my own. At this point, my girlfriend had made it back to the bike and had called the authorities. Being downtown, they came quick. Now here's the part I regretted. I grabbed the helmet I used to take down pervert number 1 and sprinted to my bike. I didn't wait for the authorities to arrive, with the story my girlfriend gave to the police. The two guys left broken on the sidewalk with lots of witnesses. I figured the smart thing to do was head directly to the bike and take my girlfriend away from the horror show. The two perverts ended up being arrested and taken away. Apparently they had a history with law enforcement. Luckily, I was not thrown in the back of a police car for being the first one to dish out damage. Witnesses, their prior offenses, and security camera evidence from the mall saved my ass. I meant it wholeheartedly that I was willing to go to jail to protect my girlfriend from two predators. The following summer, we got engaged and I got her a new helmet. I threw the old one out as it was a constant reminder of that scary event. I'm not sure what the pervert duo are up to these days, but for their sakes, let's not meet again. Because if we do, you can bet your life I'll have my helmet with me.